They say good things come to those who wait, and there has perhaps never been a more appropriate example of that on my channel than this video. The system that you see right here, the glorious red and black concoction in the Hyte Y60 case with a 7900 XTX Red Devil from PowerColor with a 7950X CPU, was put together and given away more than 4 months ago. But then I contacted the winner, whose name is Cody, and I said, Cody, do you think you could wait just a little bit longer before I send you this system? He said yes, but perhaps he wasn't aware of quite how long I was gonna ask him to wait. But I'm gonna make things right for Cody today, and I'm also gonna explain to you guys what the hell took so long. And I can say hell because it's a Red Devil graphics card. Excellent! Today's video is brought to you by Micro Center. This is one of my favorite places to buy PC parts. So if you're building or upgrading your PC, I highly recommend making your way down to one of their 25 retail stores in the US. They have consistently competitive prices and an excellent selection of PC hardware and other tech goodies. And they have a custom PC builder on the Micro Center website. Use it to spec out your rig and it will show you parts in store at your nearest location while ensuring compatibility. Then you can pick up in store or have their pros assemble it for you. So click the sponsor link in the description to find a Micro Center near you. So let's rewind to the end of 2022. The first video on this build was sort of in an in-between time where the 7900 XTX had been announced and there was some initial launch stuff happening, but I wasn't able to show you guys the aftermarket cards yet. So in that video, I got the system built with the reference 7900 XTX from AMD, and that allowed us to kick off the giveaway and help generate support for our Extra Life charity livestream, which was very successful, and thanks to all you guys who participated in that. In the follow-up video, I revealed the PowerColor Red Devil 7900 XTX, which a lot of you had guessed was going to be the card because I dropped a few subtle hints. And I also swapped out the cable extensions based on your feedback because I had some gray ones and some red ones, and everyone was like, use the red ones. But after swapping those in and installing the Red Devil, the system stopped booting, and unfortunately I was on a time crunch and I didn't have time to resolve the issue right then. 2022 ended, and then in the first week of 2023 I went to CES. I visited Lexar, who had sponsored this build originally, and they showed me this. Their new Ares DDR5 memory, which now has RGB lighting as well as both XMP and Expo settings, which made me say, Lexar, that would have been perfect for that build that I did just a few weeks ago. And they said, well, we can send some over to you, but it's probably gonna be a month or two before it actually launches. And that has been the primary reason for the delay, so we could upgrade our 32 gig non-RGB kit, which is DDR5 5200 to 64 gigs with RGB, DDR5 6000 rated, so we may upgrade this build to its final form and finally get it shipped out to Cody. So we have 3 things to accomplish today. 1 is going to be to rewire the back and get the system functional again. 2 will be to install our new Lexar Ares DDR5 RGB memory kits and see how they look. And 3rd, with a completed build, to actually boot it up, run the system, show you guys how it looks, and make sure that this side panel here isn't choking our graphics card too much of air. Alright, so I've been doing a little bit of tweaking with the system, updating a bit of the software, and I now have Hardware Info 64 up and running so we can check our temperatures. And while the system is stable and it hasn't shut down on me or overheated or anything, the temperature on the dies is actually a little bit not quite what I would want it to be. Specifically, we're idling up in the low 70s for the most part, which doesn't seem, that's way warmer than I would want it to be. You might also notice a temperature difference between die 1 and die 2 right there, and there really shouldn't be that much of a difference between those 2 dies. On the plus side, we're only maxing it just shy of 80 degrees Celsius, but I also haven't done a whole lot with the system, so I'm gonna fire up Cinebench right now and see what happens. Well, it's doing pretty much what you would expect the 7950X to do, which is to get right up to 95 degrees Celsius. Our frequency does seem to be a little bit lower at about a little over 5 gigahertz. Okay, I had to double check my numbers, but the core clocks under full load should be more like 5.2 gigahertz all core frequency. Likewise, our Cinebench R23 results should be closer to 38,000, maybe even 38,500 versus 36,000. So that combined with the temperatures being just a little bit not quite as stable or as even between the dies as I would hope. So if we assume that our cooler is working just fine and is mounted properly after we've double checked that, my next step is going to be to check our motherboard settings. And before we even go into the UEFI to try to see if we're in some weird PBO mode or something like that, I'm going to check which BIOS version we're on, which is 0805, which is from November 2022. But over on the ASUS support page for our motherboard, we see that there is a version more recently, actually just as of April 21st. So I'm going to go ahead and download that, update the BIOS, and see if that changes anything. Here we are in the UEFI. And now we wait. Okay, our BIOS has updated successfully. We can see version 1202 right over there. And initially optimistic that the CPU temperature being reported here in the UEFI is 55 degrees Celsius. Let's see if that remains when we actually get into Windows. We are back in Windows. My settings changes don't seem to have affected much. We're still up at 1.3 volts or so, both with Core 0 and Core 4. Fortunately, our memory XMP settings did take, so with all 64 gigs, we're at DDR5 6000, which is 3000 megahertz double data rate. But our CPU temperatures are still a lot warmer than we'd like them to be, specifically with CCD1, whereas CCD2 is still keeping relatively much cooler. Let's go ahead and fire up Cinebench one more time and see what happens. So once again, our temperature shot up to 95 degrees, which is, again, fairly normal for performance for a 7950X, but our frequencies over here are closer to 5 gigahertz, whereas we should be maintaining at least 5 to 5.2 gigahertz all-core frequency. And once again, we have a Cinebench score that's not where it should be. We're looking for 38,000, we're at not even 35,000. So whenever I encounter a troubleshooting situation like this one, where I've tried a handful of things to get the system to work the way I want it to work, and it's not working, I try to step back to basics, because we're just trying to run it stock. We're not doing anything fancy besides enabling expo settings on the memory. But the best way to determine if I just have a 7950X that is one of the worst performing 7950Xs that I've encountered, I need to trade in a 7950X that I know works. Unfortunately, I have one of those, so I brought over my AM5 test bed, which has a perfectly functional 7950X that I've run a bunch of tests and graphics card benchmarks with, and I performed not just a cooler remount, but an actual full CPU swap. I took the 7950X in the red system that is the suspect one, and I labeled it with a little piece of blue tape so I can tell it apart. And now I've just performed the switcheroo, so now I have the 7950X from my test bed installed in the red system over here, and I have the possibly wonky 7950X installed in my test bed. Apart from swapping the CPUs, I also cleared the CMOS on both of the systems. That is an important step to take when you're swapping CPUs if you're not aware of it. But now my only dilemma is which of the systems to test first. Is this system going to perform normally? Is this one going to suck now? I guess I'll just go ahead and turn them both on and find out. I should. After I switch the power on too. There's one. And there's two. Let's see what happens. All right, moment of truth for the red system. Let's see what our temperatures are at. Okay, well, albeit it is behaving the same way. We have a CPU CCD1 is at like 68 or 70 degrees. CCD2 is at 37 to 38 degrees. This is not, what? And again, check it out. Our voltage on like just a couple of the cores is up at 1.3, 1.2 to 1.4 volts. And granted, the system just started up, so it's not necessarily just idling right now. But in terms of that expected performance, we're still just running way too warm here. So let me go ahead and run Cinebench one more time and see if we're still getting sort of not that great of scores. Go ahead and fire up Cinebench. And you know, we're getting hot, but not as hot as before. And frequency-wise, we're running like a little bit better. We're at maybe 5.05 to 5.15 gigahertz on the all-core frequency. Yeah, again, like not super hot. We're not hitting 95 degrees like the 7950X usually does, but we're also not like getting back down to a reasonable idle temperature. And we still have one CCD that's reporting it's like 20 to 30 degrees warmer than the other CCD. And our score is also not where it should be. We should be hitting around 37 to 38,000, and we're again down shy of 36,000. All right, and the test bed has now been rebooted and set up and everything, and guess what? First of all, both CCDs are running within like a degree or two of each other, and yes, they're getting warm up to 62, 66 degrees over here, but they're also parking themselves properly and idling back down to reasonable temperatures in the 30-degree range. You can also see that reflected over here with the voltage. As you can see, all the voltages have dipped down to at least 0.85, which is what happens when the core parks and it saves power. And likewise, in terms of frequencies, we're getting up to the proper frequencies we would expect to see too. Peaking at 5.725 gigahertz on 2 or 3 of the cores. Other cores are getting up to 5.4 to 5.5 gigahertz. And again, this is the wonky CPU. This is the CPU that was behaving strangely. And in case you're wondering, my testbed is also using an ASUS motherboard, the Crosshair Hero. Let's do one more Cinebench multi-core run. Yes, it is getting hot. Frequencies are in the 5.1 to 5.2 gigahertz range, maybe 5.05 for some of those. So the frequencies are also looking pretty much the same. And finishing out, and our score is, what do you know, 38,000, where it should be. So CPU seems to be okay. CPU seems to be just fine, which is good, I suppose, but now we're kind of back to square one, figuring out why it's not behaving in this system. So somehow, inexplicably, even more time has passed. Let me bring you up to speed. After attempting to troubleshoot this system using the best troubleshooting method that there is, which is swapping in known good functional hardware to try to pinpoint where the problem might be, we pinpointed that the problem seems to be the motherboard. So a new motherboard has been sent out, and a big thank you to the folks at ASUS for doing that post-haste. But it was perhaps not post-hasty quite enough because I also went on a family trip to Yosemite. So that added another week of delay to getting this system fully functional. But now, if the gods of PC gaming will smile down upon us, hopefully we can swap this motherboard into this system, make sure it's fully functional, get it packed up and shipped out to the winter because it's been way too long. Well then, loading up hardware info is showing me that CC1 die temperature is 74 to 77 at idle, and die 2 is 46, 47 degrees at idle, which is pretty much the same gap we were seeing before. So let's load up Cinebench one more time, see if we're still experiencing the lower speed or the lower scores that we were getting. We are hitting 95 degrees pretty quickly, and I can also still tell that our boost clocks, boost frequencies haven't gotten past 5.4 yet again. And we are once again in the 35,000 range instead of up towards 38,000 where we should be. So we're not getting all the performance that we want or need out of this configuration. So I'll admit, I got pretty frustrated with things not going very smoothly, getting that red system back up to speed. I came home because I needed to come home to get packing tape, and I have a printer here to print out shipping labels, and also wanted to do some final steps on the Thermaltake system behind me for Brad. But first, this morning, I had an idea. Maybe I would finally be able to fix the red system with this idea, and here's how that went. Okay, I didn't want to give up on the system yet, and I didn't want to leave this video in sort of an unfinished state, so I took the steps that I thought would finally solve the issue. One was removing a couple memory sticks, because having 4 DIMMs or having 2 dual rank DIMMs installed, especially in AM5, can lead to either instability or not achieving peak performance. So right now, we're just running 2 of those Aries RGB DIMMs, and I updated the UEFI once again to the most recent one, which came out like literally yesterday. And guess what happened? Nothing. Well, not nothing. Slightly, it's like ever so slightly better, but you can see here we're still running about 20 to 30 degrees difference between CCD1 and CCD2. We're still idling warmer than we would like to, but at least our package power isn't like horribly out of line. That does seem to be dropping down to somewhat idle state. And of course, peak frequency, which should be about 5.75 gigahertz, is only getting up to about 5.55. That is still resulting in a Cinebench score that's maybe 2,000 shy of, I think, where it should be, usually around 37 to 38,000 for a 7950X. But the winner of the system, Cody, has been made aware of this. And since this is a giveaway system and not necessarily a system that's being sent by like a boutique builder to someone who's paying full price, Cody has indicated that he's going to be okay with maybe slightly lower than peak performance, especially if that means he will get his stinking computer somewhere shy of 6 months after he actually won it. So I did one more test to see what is the graphics card situation like, because if you weren't aware, this system has a pretty nice PowerColor Red Devil Special Edition graphics card. So I was like, well, is the CPU holding the GPU back? And to at least give us a vague idea of that, I ran 3D Mark times by Extreme so I can get a comparison. CPU score is about 12,200, graphics score is about 15,100, and if we compare that to the benchmarks that I ran back in like November or December, whenever this was, we can see that CPU score is a bit lower than it should be. This was with the 7950X, so 12,800, and that does line up with the frequency just being off by a couple hundred megahertz. But my graphics score here with the reference 7900 XTX was 14,336. Here it is 15,132, so that is a nice uplift over the stock performance, which should be the case since this graphics card is overclocked. and yeah, we're hitting 3030 megahertz here on the GPU shader clock. So with all of that said, I'm going to pack this system up, get it shipped out so that Cody can finally start using it. And I guess you guys can let me know in the comments if I made the right call by cutting this off and getting it shipped out, or should I have held on to it longer to see if I could get the peak performance out of it? I'm not sure. Not sure which was the right way to go, but this is the way I'm going for now. So obviously the final setup for the red build is not ideal, but I think it is good enough, and I think Cody's gonna be happy with that. In the meantime, I talked to Brad about this system back here because I was gonna be like, hey Brad, I think you know, there's a little bit of setup you'll need to do here, but you should be able to handle that, right? Well, Brad is actually still pretty new to PC building, and he was asking me for some advice on reinstalling the GPU, as well as system setup in general. So I opted to set this system up for him. And indeed, that is what I've been working on for a little bit of time. I also wanted to, you know, double check that nothing wonky was going on with this system like it was with the other system. And fortunately, no, it's not. We have the Expo settings loaded up here. So the memory is running at the right speed, and the CPU is also well within range of where it should be. Since we're using the Gigabyte Aorus Master motherboard, I did update the BIOS, but they don't have a like recent update, but I checked the SoC voltage and we're not going beyond 1.2, at least according to the software monitoring. And everything else with the system is good to go, with Windows installed and NVIDIA drivers loaded and the chipset drivers and all that good stuff. I even loaded up the Thermaltake RGB software because that is how you control that little LCD panel. So that's now working properly, and I've got it set to carousel, so it's gonna cycle between stats for like the GPU and the CPU. We also have terrible glare because I'm at home and the lighting isn't quite as ideally suited here. But hey, look, all of the RGB lighting is working for all the fans too. This system is going much more smoothly than the red system, I will admit. So it's time to get this one packed up too. So now that this system is good to go and I've at least come to a conclusion on the red system, there's one last step, getting these two packed up to ship out. There, fits. And there it is. My 4 packages are packed and ready to go, and I hope that we can now say goodbye to this little saga of Paul's Hardware, because it's taken a bit too long to get these systems shipped out, I'll be perfectly honest. But that brings us back to the title of this video, which is, what do you guys think? Would you wait as long as Cody did, for example, for his red PC, for me to get some new hardware and then go through a bunch of troubleshooting stuff? Would you be as kind and as patient as Brad was when I was like, hey Brad, even though your system's totally fine, I need to push this back a week because I'm going on vacation and I wasn't able to get it shipped out in time because I was working on the red PC. But you guys, I really love doing giveaways because it allows me to give stuff away and get it to somebody who might need it. But I also like showing you guys this other side of the giveaways that happens from time to time, which is after the giveaway has ended, actually getting the system finalized and the winner picked and the system shipped out can add a bunch of work to the tail end of that project that I'm not always anticipating. But I've been working to get this finished off, as well as a couple other lingering projects, because I'm ready for the next phase of Paul's Hardware. What's gonna happen? I've been promising you guys an update, and I will be coming through with that soon. And of course, I'm also getting ready for Computex coverage at the end of May and the beginning of June. So stay tuned for that. Hit the thumbs up button on this video if you enjoyed it, because it did take a long time to put together. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already for more videos coming at you real soon. And of course, check out my store at paulshardware.net, where you can buy shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and all sorts of other high quality merch. Thank you guys again for watching this one, and we'll see you in the next video.